Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Some women don't break men with rage, they break them with indifference, and that wound never heals. History shows us that the most devastating collapses often didn't come from armies or battles, but from silent forces no one saw coming. Quiet droughts, invisible plagues, silent betrayals. The Sigma female is that invisible plague for men who think they can handle her. She doesn't storm into your life demanding attention. She simply exists in a way that dismantles everything you thought you knew about control, love, and power. The irony? Most men walk toward her thinking they've discovered a rare treasure, only to realize she's less like a prize and more like a mirror that reflects back their deepest insecurities. One moment you think you're irresistible, the next moment you're questioning whether she even remembered your name. And when she moves on without flinching, you're left pacing like a man who just lost an argument with a wall. This isn't just another story about strong women. It's about a specific kind of woman who doesn't need to shout, doesn't need validation, and doesn't play by the same emotional economy men are used to. And that's why most who try to handle her don't just fail, they leave shattered. Number 1. She leaves scars without malice. She doesn't go out of her way to destroy men, and that's exactly why she leaves the deepest scars. A Sigma female doesn't plot, manipulate, or scheme to break anyone. She just lives in her truth, and that truth is often unbearable for men who rely on illusions to feel strong. They expect drama, conflict, or resistance they can fight against. What they get instead is calm detachment that makes them realize they were never as important as they believed. That realization hits harder than any insult or rejection. The scar she leaves isn't from cruelty, but from clarity. A man comes in thinking he can control her, charm her, or define her, only to learn she's untouchable in ways that strip him of power. He walks away with his ego cracked, not because she tried to humiliate him, but because she never needed him in the first place. That's a pain few men know how to process, being dismissed without a word, without a fight, without any acknowledgement that they even mattered. What unsettles men the most is that she doesn't carry malice. There's no revenge, no plotting, no bitterness. She's not sitting around thinking about him or what he lost. She simply continues her life with the same unshaken rhythm. And it's in that silence, in that absence of struggle, that men start to unravel. They replay every interaction, searching for where they went wrong, and every replay cuts deeper. The scar forms not because she attacked them, but because she didn't have to. The truth is, a Sigma female's greatest weapon is that she doesn't weaponize anything. Her standards, her independence, her refusal to bend, they're just natural parts of who she is. But for men who depend on being needed, desired, or validated, those traits are unbearable. They leave with a haunting memory of being irrelevant in the presence of a woman they couldn't conquer. That memory doesn't fade. It lingers, bruising their pride, whispering that maybe they weren't as powerful as they thought. That's the kind of scar no one else sees, but it's the kind a man carries for life. Not from being broken down by force, but from being quietly shown he was never built as strong as he imagined. Number 2, she doesn't worship masculinity. She doesn't hand out crowns just because someone shows up with broad shoulders and a beard. A Sigma female doesn't automatically bow to masculinity the way many men have been conditioned to expect. She isn't impressed by being male, by the voice that booms a little louder, or the chest that puffs out a little higher. To her, masculinity isn't an automatic ticket to respect. It's something that must hold weight when words are stripped away. If a man's value only survives when he's being praised, flattered, or obeyed, then to her, he's already invisible. That's why so many men feel unsteady in her presence. They're used to women feeding their sense of importance, wrapping their identity in constant reassurance, and making them feel like kings simply for existing. But the Sigma female doesn't play that game. She doesn't validate empty authority, and she doesn't fuel fragile pride. She sees straight through performance. If the man has no depth when stripped of his ego, no grounded presence when silence takes over, he disappears in her eyes. This isn't about her rejecting men altogether, it's about her rejecting illusions. Masculinity, to her, isn't about domination, entitlement, or expectation. It's about how a man stands when there's no audience. Does he still carry weight when no one is clapping? Does his character command respect without demanding it? If not, then he's nothing more than a shadow to her. And that's what leaves so many men shattered. They realize their entire sense of self was built on applause, not authenticity. The brutal truth is, she doesn't worship masculinity because she doesn't need to. Her life doesn't orbit around propping up someone else's image. And men who rely on that worship find themselves exposed, stripped of their imagined royalty, and left staring at a woman who doesn't flinch at their titles or their testosterone. To her, masculinity isn't a throne. It's a test. And most men fail it the moment they demand to be treated like kings without ever proving they are one. Number 3. She makes powerless men invisible. She doesn't go around swinging rejection like a sword, and that's exactly what makes her so unsettling. A Sigma female doesn't waste her time pointing out weak men, mocking them, or making a show of brushing them off. She simply doesn't see them. To her, they're background noise, part of the blur she moves through on her way to something that actually matters. And that absence of acknowledgement is far more devastating than rejection, because at least rejection means you were recognized. Invisibility means you never registered at all. For men who build their identity on being noticed, whether for their looks, money, or bravado, this is unbearable. They've grown used to some level of attention, even from women who don't truly want them. But with a Sigma female, there's no scrap of validation to cling to. They don't even get the dignity of being dismissed. They vanish into nothingness, standing right in front of her, yet already forgotten. That quiet erasure cuts deeper than insults ever could. What really destroys them is how effortless it is for her. She doesn't make speeches about her standards. She doesn't set out to prove she's above anyone. She simply lives in her own rhythm. And in that rhythm, shallow men don't even register. It's not anger. It's indifference. And indifference has a power cruelty can never touch. Men realize, often too late, that in her world, presence must be earned, not assumed. That invisibility gnaws at their pride. They replay moments in their head, desperate to know why she never noticed, why she never paused long enough to care. But the answer is simple. She saw nothing worth her attention. And the ego, which thrives on acknowledgement, even negative acknowledgement, has no defense against being unseen. This is why Sigma females shatter more men than they reject. Because rejection at least says, you were there. Invisibility says, you never existed. And once a man tastes that kind of erasure, it follows him, haunting every future interaction. He can't shake the memory of being treated as if he were nothing, and the truth is, to her, he was. Number 4. Her intensity isn't for everyone. Her intensity isn't the kind that comes from chaos or emotional volatility. It's the kind that comes from being fully present, deeply aware, and unafraid of her own power. Most men say they want a woman who is real and deep. But when they meet a Sigma female, they realize depth isn't just poetry and late-night talks. It's accountability. It's raw honesty. It's energy that doesn't let you hide. That kind of intensity feels like standing too close to fire. It warms you if you're strong enough, but it will burn you alive if you're fragile. Men drawn to her at first often mistake that intensity for mystery or allure. They think it's romantic until they realize it demands something from them. Emotional strength, mental stability, and an authenticity they've never had to show before. The Sigma female doesn't dim her flame to make others comfortable. She expects you to step into it or step aside. And most men, once they feel that weight, retreat quickly, because they recognize they don't have the capacity to match it. What breaks them isn't just the fire itself, but the mirror it creates. Her intensity exposes who can withstand the heat and who can't. If you're insecure, she'll highlight it without a word. If you lack direction, her clarity will make your confusion unbearable. If you're fragile, her steadiness will feel like a threat. Men leave burnt not because she attacked them, but because her very presence demanded growth they weren't ready for. The truth is, her intensity weeds people out without her lifting a finger. The ones who can't handle it run, often leaving with bruised egos and the haunting thought that they weren't enough. The ones who stay are rare, because they're the few who see that her fire isn't destruction, it's purification. But those men are the exception. Most never make it past the first wave of heat. In the end, being with her isn't a casual experience. It's a test. And most men, after feeling her intensity, walk away not just scorched, but painfully aware that they were never built for the kind of depth she brings to the table. Number 5, she doesn't fear losing you, you fear losing her. She doesn't cling, she doesn't beg, and she doesn't sit up at night worrying if you'll still be there tomorrow. A Sigma female holds no fear of losing a man, and that calm certainty is what makes men unravel. Most relationships run on a quiet contract of mutual insecurity. Both sides worry about being abandoned, replaced, or forgotten. But when one person removes that fear entirely, the balance shifts. With her, that imbalance is glaring. She knows she'll be fine without you, and suddenly you're the one wondering if you'll be fine without her. That shift terrifies men because it dismantles one of their greatest illusions, that women need them more than they need women. A Sigma female doesn't. She's built a life that runs smoothly whether you stay or go. That doesn't mean she doesn't love deeply, but her love never turns into dependence. And for men who equate being loved with being needed, this is destabilizing. They realize her affection is a choice, not a crutch. That means she could walk away at any moment, and that truth lingers like a storm cloud over their pride. The more secure she is in herself, the more insecure men become around her. They start to measure the relationship in terms of who needs who, and the answer is always the same. They need her more. That realization forces them to confront their own fragility because suddenly the power dynamic they're used to leaning on is reversed. What makes this worse is her composure. If things end, she won't fall apart or beg for closure. She'll carry on with the same rhythm she had before, her life uninterrupted. That image haunts men, the thought of being replaced not by another man, but by her own independence. They don't fear losing her to competition. They fear losing her to herself. And that's the raw truth. She doesn't fear losing you because she never tied her identity to your presence. But you, standing across from her, know deep down that losing her means losing more than a partner. You lose the one person who showed you what love looks like without fear, and that void is something you'll never unfeel. Number 6, you can't corner her emotionally. You can't drag her into a corner with tears, drama, or emotional traps because she doesn't play by those rules. A Sigma female has a kind of emotional independence that's rare and almost unsettling. She feels deeply, yes, but her feelings aren't shackled to guilt or pressure. She knows where her emotions end and someone else's begin, and that boundary makes her impossible to cage. Men who are used to bending women through guilt-tripping pity tactics or ultimatums find themselves powerless against her because their usual tools simply bounce off. It's not that she's cold or unfeeling, far from it. It's that her empathy isn't something you can weaponize. She won't cry just because you're crying. She won't stay because you're begging. And she won't compromise her truth because you're threatening to walk away. That terrifies men who rely on emotional leverage as their main source of control. With her, those levers don't exist. She listens, she understands, but she doesn't fold. The more a man tries to corner her emotionally, the more he realizes he's only exposing his own weakness. And that's the brutal part. What he thought was strength, what worked on others before, looks like desperation in her eyes. That mirror crushes egos faster than rejection ever could. Because instead of winning her sympathy, he ends up revealing how dependent he really is on manipulation, just to feel in control. What makes this even harder for men is the quiet way she does it. She doesn't argue, she doesn't explode, she doesn't match their theatrics. She just doesn't move. That stillness is unshakable, and in that stillness men feel their own strategies collapsing. They're left without a script, realizing there's nothing they can do to bend her will. And that's why being with her feels dangerous to fragile men. Not because she intends harm, but because she refuses to be trapped in emotional games. The cage they built for others never closes on her. And standing there with an open door and no control, men discover a truth they can't escape. Her freedom is permanent, and their power was always an illusion. Number 7, she's proof you're replaceable. She is the living contradiction to everything fragile egos want to believe. Men who build their identity on being the center of a woman's universe crumble when faced with a Sigma female because she doesn't orbit around anyone. She carries herself in a way that makes it brutally clear. No man, no matter how charming, wealthy, or powerful, is irreplaceable. That realization doesn't just bruise pride. It shatters the illusion that masculinity automatically guarantees permanence in a woman's life. What makes her proof so sharp is how quietly it shows itself. She doesn't announce it, she doesn't brag, and she doesn't even try to make a point. Her life simply moves forward with or without you. If you're there, good. If you're gone, she doesn't stall, she doesn't spiral, she recalibrates and continues. And that kind of indifference cuts deeper than open rejection. Because while most women leave space for men to believe they were the one, she leaves nothing. She doesn't need to erase you. You fade on your own. For men who thrive on being indispensable, this is unbearable. They're used to women needing their presence for validation, stability, or identity. But the Sigma female refuses to hand out that kind of power. Her independence isn't loud, it's lived. She is self-sustaining, emotionally and practically. And when a man realizes he's not holding her life together, but is instead just a visitor in it, his sense of control collapses. The hardest part for men to accept is that she doesn't see this as cruelty. To her, it's simply truth. Everyone is replaceable in her world, including herself. She doesn't cling to illusions of permanence, and she doesn't ask anyone else to. That level of detachment is rare, and it flips the entire script on men who expect to be worshipped. Being with her teaches an uncomfortable lesson. The role you thought made you central was just a temporary seat at her table. And if you mistake that seat for a throne, you'll feel the ground vanish beneath you the moment she stands up. Because with her, love is real, but dependency is never part of the deal, and without dependency, most men discover they were never kings at all, just passing guests. Number 8. Her mystery isn't an act. Her mystery isn't a performance, it's her natural state. She doesn't dress it up, she doesn't stage it, and she doesn't use it as bait. A Sigma female is genuinely difficult to know, not because she's hiding, but because she refuses to dilute herself for easy consumption. Men who approach her with the usual tricks, flattery, persistence, charm, expect doors to open, but with her, they don't. What breaks them is the slow, unsettling realization that there is no cheat code, no formula, no strategy that guarantees access. She's not playing hard to get. She's simply not for everyone. That reality wrecks men who are used to transactional dynamics. With most women, they can lean on predictable exchanges, attention for validation, gifts for affection, persistence for eventual surrender. But a Sigma female dismantles all of that without lifting a finger. She doesn't withhold out of spite. She withholds because access to her world requires alignment, not tactics. If a man doesn't resonate with her depth, he can knock forever, and the door will never open. The haunting part is how calm she is about it. She doesn't tease with half-promises, and she doesn't manipulate with mixed signals. She simply exists in her truth, and men either fit into it or they don't. And when they don't, she doesn't punish them. She doesn't mock them. She just lets them fade. For men, that silence feels unbearable, because it forces them to accept that not every woman is theirs to win. Her mystery works like gravity. It pulls in those capable of handling it and repels those who aren't. The ones who leave broken aren't destroyed by rejection, but by the sobering fact that their usual strategies don't apply. They discover, sometimes too late, that she wasn't hiding a secret. They were searching for shortcuts to a depth that can't be faked, and that's the brutal honesty of it. Her mystery isn't something she does, it's something she is. She's not a puzzle you solve, she's a reality you either rise to meet or remain excluded from. For most men, that exclusion burns, because it shows them the truth they've been avoiding. She isn't unknowable, they're just unworthy of knowing her. Number 9. She forces you to face your real self. She doesn't hand you mirrors that flatter, she holds up the one that tells the truth. Most men are used to women softening their flaws, feeding their egos, and cushioning their insecurities. That kind of gentle inflation lets them believe they're stronger, smarter, and more capable than they really are. But a Sigma female doesn't play that game. She doesn't inflate, she exposes. And standing in front of that kind of honesty is unbearable for men who've built their confidence on smoke and scaffolding. Her presence works like a spotlight you never asked for. You think you're confident until her silence makes you question whether your confidence is real or just an act. You think you're decisive until her independence makes your choices look flimsy. You think you're secure until her lack of need for you highlights how much you actually depend on validation. She doesn't call you out with words. She calls you out by simply existing, by being so firmly rooted in herself that your cracks become visible next to her stability. What makes this so brutal is that she doesn't do it maliciously. She's not sitting there trying to tear you down. She just won't pretend. She won't exaggerate your strengths or shield you from your weaknesses. And for many men, that absence of flattery feels like cruelty. They drown not because she pushed them under, but because she refused to hold them afloat with false praise. If you're insecure, you can't last in her orbit. She doesn't coddle fragile egos, and she doesn't provide the scaffolding most men rely on to look taller than they are. Around her, you stand as you are, unpolished, unprotected, undeniable. And for men who aren't ready to face that reflection, the experience is suffocating. They retreat, often bitter, blaming her for making them feel small, when in truth, she simply showed them the size they really were. That's the danger of a Sigma female. She doesn't force growth with lectures or ultimatums. She forces it by refusing to mask reality. You either face your real self and rise, or you collapse under the weight of seeing what you've avoided all along. Number 10. She breaks the transactional game. She doesn't operate in the cheap economy most men are comfortable with. For many, relationships are little more than a transaction. Money for time, gifts for affection, attention for intimacy. It's a trade system where effort is rarely about connection, but about leverage. They're used to women who play along, who take the offers, who exchange validation for resources. But when those same men encounter a Sigma female, the ground falls out from under them. She doesn't play by those rules. She doesn't attach her affection to what you can hand her. And when a man realizes his wallet, his status, or his constant chasing holds no currency with her, he feels bankrupt. Her presence can't be bought because she's not for sale. She doesn't see relationships as deals, and she doesn't measure men by what they can provide externally. To her, all the transactional gestures are noise if there's no depth behind them. A fancy dinner means nothing if the conversation is hollow. A gift feels cheap if it's being used as a bribe. And when she rejects those offers, men who thought they were negotiating from a position of power suddenly find themselves powerless. This doesn't mean she's ungrateful or dismissive. She can appreciate generosity, but she doesn't confuse it with substance. That distinction is what unsettles men the most. Their entire strategy unravels because they were never prepared to be valued for who they are without their props. They wanted shortcuts, ways to bypass genuine connection by flashing resources. With her, those shortcuts dead end every time. And here's the brutal truth. She isn't impressed by what most men think is impressive because she's already built a life that doesn't depend on them. She provides for herself, entertains herself, and secures herself. So when someone tries to buy her with surface-level offerings, all it proves is that they don't understand her in the slightest. That gap between what they're selling and what she values swallows them whole. Men leave her feeling not just rejected, but exposed. They discover that the transactional game only works on women who need something from them. With a Sigma female, they can't buy a seat at her table. They can only earn it, and most men don't know how. Number 11. She doesn't need you for identity. She doesn't disappear into a man's story, and that's what unsettles so many who come across her. While most women are conditioned, subtly or directly, to fold into a man's narrative, the Sigma female writes her own. She doesn't attach her identity to being someone's girlfriend, wife, or muse. She's already an entire universe, fully formed, with her own center of gravity. Men who approach her expecting to become the axis she orbits around soon realize they're just another star in her sky, not the sun holding her together. This is where many men collapse. They've been fed the illusion that women find their worth in relation to a man, that they become complete only when someone chooses them. But a Sigma female dismantles that illusion without effort. She is already complete. She's not waiting to be chosen, not waiting to be defined, and not waiting for someone to make her life meaningful. When a man comes in thinking his presence will fill some void, he's confronted with the brutal truth. There is no void. And without a void to fill, his sense of purpose shrinks to nothing. What makes this worse is that she doesn't reject men outright. She simply doesn't need them to validate her existence. If he brings value, if he adds depth, she'll embrace it. But if he doesn't, she won't bend herself around him just to make the relationship work. Men who expect to be worshipped for simply showing up quickly find themselves irrelevant in her world because she doesn't cling to placeholders. She'd rather be alone than dilute her life with someone who doesn't expand it. That independence is liberating for her, but suffocating for men who equate masculinity with being indispensable. They discover, sometimes painfully, that she can love them without needing them, and that distinction cuts deep, because need creates power, but choice creates vulnerability. And being chosen without being needed leaves men terrified that she could unchoose them at any time and remain perfectly whole. That's the essence of the Sigma female. She doesn't need you for identity. She already knows who she is. And for men who've built their worth on being the missing piece, she's living proof that they were never part of the puzzle in the first place. Number 12. Her standards aren't negotiable. Her standards aren't flexible guidelines you can charm your way around. They're boundaries carved in stone. Most women, when they like someone enough, start to compromise. They shave down their expectations, overlook red flags, or convince themselves that potential is enough. But a Sigma female doesn't play that game. She doesn't fall in love with potential, and she doesn't soften her requirements to keep someone around. If you don't meet her standards, she doesn't negotiate. She eliminates. That's where most men get blindsided. They're used to persistence paying off, to women eventually lowering the bar out of affection or fear of losing them. But with her, there is no bar lowering. Her standards exist with or without you, and your presence doesn't earn you exceptions. That kind of clarity makes men feel powerless, because it strips them of the bargaining chip they rely on, the idea that enough effort or charm will make her settle. What really unnerves men is that her standards aren't superficial. They're not just about money, looks, or achievements. They're about depth, character, discipline, and alignment. She demands consistency, not convenience. She demands authenticity, not performance. And those things can't be faked for long. Men who show up with a mask hoping to impress eventually suffocate under it because she'll see right through. The moment you fall short, she doesn't rage, she doesn't beg, and she doesn't try to fix you. She simply removes you. That silent dismissal hits harder than any dramatic breakup. Men are left reeling, wondering how she walked away so cleanly when in reality she was never negotiating to begin with. To her, standards aren't about controlling others. They're about protecting herself, and that protection is non-negotiable. For men, the pain comes from realizing they weren't disqualified by accident. They disqualified themselves. And in her world, there's no coming back from that. Because once she sees you don't measure up, she doesn't unsee it. She won't rewrite her rules to make space for you. She won't rewrite herself to make you comfortable. And that's why most men leave shattered, not because she broke them, but because they were hoping to be the exception in a system where exceptions don't exist. Most men approach a Sigma female thinking they'll conquer her, only to find themselves conquered by their own illusions. She doesn't destroy with cruelty. She dismantles with truth. Her silence unmasks insecurity. Her standards expose weakness. Her indifference crushes manipulation. And her presence itself becomes a mirror no man can escape. She doesn't play the games, bend under pressure, or feed egos that thrive on being worshipped. And that's why she leaves so many shattered. Not because she tried to break them, but because she never needed them in the first place. If you can handle her, it means you've already built yourself into a man who doesn't need to be coddled, who doesn't fear being replaceable, and who doesn't depend on tricks to feel powerful. But if you're not that man, the Sigma female will expose it faster than anyone else ever could. She's not here to complete you. She's here to show you who you really are. And most men can't handle that reflection. If this resonated with you, if it challenged you, rattled you, or opened your eyes to truths most people won't say out loud, then don't just watch and walk away. Hit that subscribe button and join a community built on raw honesty and unfiltered insight. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what hit hardest. Smash that like button if you value content that doesn't water things down. And share this with someone who thinks they can handle the reality of a Sigma female. Let's see if they truly can. This isn't just content. It's a wake-up call. Stay tuned, because what's coming next cuts even deeper.